In this video, I wanted to revisit the classic matchup, I guess you can call it at this point, in the Rise of the Floodborn meta between Ruby Amethyst and Emerald Steel Discard. I have two matches for you from two different perspectives. In this first clip, we're going first with Ruby Amethyst. In the next clip, I'll be going second with Emerald Steel Discard against Ruby Amethyst. So this matchup is definitely, I would say, the toughest match for Ruby Amethyst, and I would say Steel Song is probably the second toughest match. The Steel Song match is kind of 50-50, but Emerald Steel Discard definitely does have a significant advantage in this matchup here because they have a number of different ways to obviously rip apart your hand before you can get any of your draw engine. Rolling in order to kind of outlast the discard, but also the fact that when you are establishing a lot of this early game, as you can see me doing here with like the mini mouse, and you're going to see that I value establishing a surfer here because I want to try to generate as much lore as possible while the opponent, has to wait essentially 6 turns before they start getting real threats on the board, because the first couple of turns they're establishing the Bucky, the John, the discards, and then it's not really until turns like 5 and 6 that they can start doing the Tinkerbell grab your sword stuff to wipe your early threats. But that being said, if you do get wiped, you are in really bad shape. And so you can see here my opponent does have 5 cards in hand. They establish a Prince John. I'm on 5 lore. I've got a bit of an established board. We're ahead in the ink by 1. But this is where the opponent starts to like clawback advantage. The Hypnotize is going to allow them to draw 2 here. It does use up their turn, but they don't care about that because whether I get to 10 or 15 lore, it doesn't really matter once they put me on no resources. You have to essentially start top decking your way, hoping to win. So you see me sing Friends here, which again, you can argue is not really the greatest, because should I just be questing? And do I really want to be refilling my hand if they have a Prince John on field and they're going to constantly get advantage off the discard? When they play a Lucifer, I opt to discard the 1 Be Prepared, because while I would not mind discarding the Elsa, I do value the Fox for ink, and I definitely value the Rabbit. We end up drawing into another Be Prepared though, and I'm just like, okay, if they do have a Bippity Boppity Boo, this isn't great. I do quest to 10, but now it's at the critical point in the game. While you have turn 7 Be Prepared, they have turn 6 drop Tinkerbell, sing Grab Your Swords, which, like I mentioned earlier, will absolutely decimate anything you have on the board, and that is exactly what they have here. So you can see that they wipe everything out, but we draw off Rabbit. They have 4 cards in hand and they have 3 cards on board. I go up to 5 cards in hand. I ink the Olaf for my 7th ink, and I drop a Be Prepared. Okay. Now remember, I went first, and it looks like I'm behind on tempo now because I have 3 cards in hand. They have 5. The good news is that I had two big hitters in the Elsa and the Ursula. But now with this second drop of the Lucifer here, I'm going to lose 2 of those cards, unfortunately. So I opt to keep the Ursula here, which is questionable, but I didn't want to risk just keeping the Elsa and drawing into an uninkable. Now I draw into a goat and I opt to play that instead because the opponent has 0 lore. So if I drop the Ursula here, I wouldn't be able to draw off of it. But there is a case to be made that just putting that big body on board to quest is advantageous. But I'd rather wait and see what my opponent has. They could have a discard, and they did in the Hypnotize, but they opted not to play it, so I'm actually thankful that they did not do that. They take out my goat with a Fire the Cannons, which is pretty unconventional for this deck, and the Tinkerbell drop here, but they're down to 2 cards now. So I go ahead and I establish the Ursula now that the opponent has some lore from questing with the Lucifer, and I'm able to draw into a mini mouse. Seeing that the opponent inked the Hypnotize, my guess is that they're kind of running, and the Sudden Chill, I think before that, they're kind of running out of their discard, or they don't care about discard anymore because they kind of think they've stabilized the board in terms of keeping me off of all my resources. So I don't ink just in case I wanted to keep this Maui so I can take out the Tinkerbell, which is exactly what I'm able to do here. Because if I would have inked the Minnie Mouse last turn and the opponent did have a discard for my final card in hand being the Maui, I would have no way to deal with that Tinkerbell. So that's why I kept it there. We drew into a second Minnie Mouse, obviously, so we inked 1, played the Maui and the Tinkerbell, and then the opponent establishes a board here. But at this point at 15 lore, I'm kind of pressing game. The Jasper prevents my Ursula from questing, so we take out the Lucifer, and then the Maui stabilizes by taking out the Jasper, and then we quest with Minnie Mouse. Now I'm pushing game. They have to take out like multiple threats here because taking out the Ursula alone isn't enough. Taking out the Minnie Mouse, the 2 Minnie Mouses isn't enough either. The Beast isn't able to draw them into anything they need, and then they end up losing the game. So a little bit of luck on our side on Ruby Amethyst, but I think some of the decisions we ended up making there really paid off. Now we'll move into the second match where we're going second using the Emerald Steel discard. So we aggressively mulligan for a Bucky and Prince John, and we are able to get it. In my version of Emerald Steel discard, I've really tried to cut back on the amount of uninkables because playing on curve is so important for this deck that if you just end up with a bricked hand, you're just up the creek in terms of like not being able to play. And to be fair, Steel Song is kind of the same way because you do play like 17 almost, like between 15, 17, maybe even 18 uninkables at times, because all of your like good songs are uninkable, right? Let the Storm Rage on, A Whole New World, Grab Your Swords. And so in this deck, while we do play the Grab Your Swords, obviously we don't play Whole New Worlds. I do cut back. I only play 3 in mine because just drawing multiples of them in the early game is really, really bad. But yeah, you can see here in this instance, we're able to establish a Bucky. And my version of discard, contrary to my opponent's version, I don't play the Sudden Chills and stuff like that, or the 2-drop Flynn Riders. I opt for focusing on the Floodborn package, which does make me more susceptible to Steel. But to be honest, Emerald Steel discard, no matter what version you build, is going to have a hard time with Steel Song anyways, for example. But at least with this version, your backup plan is basically Lucifer, Bippity Boppity Boo. And obviously Bippity Boppity Boo has more synergy with the deck than just Lucifer. You can recast Floodborns, etc. And with Morph coming out, it's going to greatly boost the discard deck. And so again, you've probably seen my other videos where I've used Morph in this deck and just how amazing it can be, because your opponent is basically playing a guessing game into what Floodborn you're going to drop. And you know, not needing to play any of the smaller characters in order to shift is a huge, like, it frees up a lot of potential other like tech cards that you can include in this deck. So my opponent here eventually establishes double mini here, and they understand. They know that they have to try to raise, but not having a turn 1 drop for them really puts them behind on the lore count. But in the end, you're going to see that it's not really going to matter too much, because when you play like Ruby Amethyst, you have to understand when it is that you need to focus on the control aspect of the game. When do I need to draw cards, focus on removal, etc., versus when do I need to go aggro, right? Which is what you saw me do in the first match, where I was playing Ruby Amethyst and I was like, I have to go aggro here. That's my only real out in order to beat discard, because I'm not going to out advantage them in this scenario. And my opponent does reveal an Arthur, so they are on the more aggro version of Ruby Amethyst. Probably why they weren't able to play too early, because you know, they were stuck with these like 3-cost characters. And again, this is why top players play like upwards of like 8, 9, 10 1-drops. Sometimes they play 4 Olaf, 4 Mini, and 2 Pascals, right? Because they know how important that 1-drop is in order to cycle through with your Snake on turn 2, etc. And if you don't have that, you're basically playing on turn 3, and at which point your opponent is likely, I don't want to say already won the game, but you know, they've established what they need. Now, the other thing about Ruby Amethyst is that they do heavily rely on Be Prepared, and so if you're able to force the discard of the Be Prepared, like what you saw the opponent do against me, even though I didn't have to discard it, but I opted to, that can be really good in kind of giving you the peace of mind that you can go wide with your board. But here you can see my opponent is struggling to try to figure out what exactly they need to do here, and their hand, you know, drawing these 1-drops later on in the game is just really underwhelming for them, because even, I mean, at this point I have a wide enough board before turn 7 where Be Prepared could come down, that a Lady Tremaine and stuff like that isn't significant enough to do anything. Now they do end up dropping a Yzma, which is really good in this matchup in my opinion, because while you care about the board presence, because you're on Be Prepared, you don't necessarily always want to have a super wide board. So Yzma shrinking your board and giving you draw actually plays well into the discard matchup where you want to be prepared. I'm surprised they didn't quest with the Arthur to bounce back their Yzma to preserve it here, but I guess they're just afraid of their Arthur getting banished right now, or they have another plan for their Arthur based on what's in their hand. But you know, my Donald is giving them, you know, some outs, right, because it's drawing them cards. But nonetheless, we're in a really commanding position here, and we could wipe the opponent's board, but on turn 7 it's not really worth it. But my game plan, or my thought process here, is I don't even care if you have a Be Prepared, because I'm going to, okay, first of all, recycle this beast in order to make you discard, and I'll draw again, which will put you on 4 cards. Then even if you draw for turn and you're back up to 5, you're gonna have to ink and then you're going to have to cast Be Prepared. So that's going to put you down to 3 cards again. And my hand is big enough that I can just reestablish my board anyways. So I'm not even worried about getting Be Prepared here at this point because I've generated so much advantage. Not to mention I drew into Tinkerbell, which, you know, being able to cast that as a Floodborn in order to not only save my other Grab Your Swords, but trigger my Bucky and my Prince John again. Now it puts them on 3 cards. They're going to draw for 4. And, you know, playing the Be Prepared here is totally fine. Because like I said, it uses up their whole turn there, and then they'll end on 2 cards in hand, right? And then I can probably just discard them later on or something. So even though you have to fear the Be Prepared as an Emerald Steel discard player, if you play this deck, you know that it's not really that significant. Now, the opponent didn't quest with their Yzma. I think at this point they kind of gave up because they know the match is essentially over. Because, yeah, you play Snake, you bounce back your Yzma, you can't recast your Yzma. So, because you're only on 4 ink, you don't even bother inking that turn, so you're definitely not on Be Prepared if you're playing the Snake as your first action. We have all the answers in the world. I don't know what I'm doing here because I could, you know, just play the game and win. Oh, I think I know what I was thinking here. It's like, is it worth establishing the second Bucky before I drop the Floodborn to force a double discard? Because you would think that it would be better to keep the Bucky and the Prince John in hand to play after the Be Prepared from the opponent. But like I mentioned, like I'm in such a commanding position that I'm just getting greedy and saying, no, I'll have my Floodborn Jafar make you discard 2. Because again, when you cast your Be Prepared, like you have to ink and cast the Be Prepared. So you're still going to lose your whole tempo for the turn casting the Be Prepared. And you'll draw a card, putting you on 3 cards. Ink and Be Prepared puts you on 1 card left in your hand. You can't do anything else for that turn because you spent all 7 ink casting the Be Prepared. I have, what, like 9 cards in hand? And if you don't have the Be Prepared, I just win the game anyways. So as we come to the end of this match, you're going to see that even though I was trying to play around the Be Prepared the whole time, and it, you know, didn't end up mattering. The opponent doesn't even have it. So yeah, like I said, the match was over last turn when they kind of just gave up with the Yzma Snake cycle. They don't even bother doing anything with their Snake because they know it's over. They're just showing me what's in their hand before they resign. So before you drop a dislike on this video, because I know playing discard can be quite cringe, I'm just showing you guys for science, like this is what the meta was towards the end of the Rise of the Floodborn format. Yes, discard is very frustrating to play against. You can see here, just you're looking at this and you're like, what is even happening here? How do you have like half your deck in your hand and on board and your opponent has no resources? And it's like, yeah, you're just adding insult to injury with these Lucifers now. But that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this video. If you've made it this far, let me know in the comment section below how you think this matchup was for you, or if you've just seen it in being played in the Rise of the Floodborn meta. And a like would be appreciated on this video. Thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.